Bonjour French 1. This is your section 1.1 video notes all about subject pronouns. As always, there are a few things out here to the side that there's not necessarily a major place for on your paper. These are the pronunciations of the pronouns. If you want to write them in, you can, but you do not have to. Now, everything that's on the chart you definitely want to fill in, as well as the other blanks that you'll find on some of the other screens here in just a moment. Subject pronouns are something that we have in the English language. They're the words I, you, he, she, it, we, and they in the English language. And they are called pronouns because they stand in for other nouns. So instead of saying, for example, if you're telling a story about Lucy and saying that Lucy went to the store and Lucy bought a t-shirt and Lucy took the t-shirt home and Lucy wore the t-shirt to the dance, we change the word Lucy, which is the subject of our sentence, and we replace it with the subject pronoun she. And all of a sudden you are less repetitive because you can say Lucy went to the store, she bought a shirt, she took it home, she wore it to the dance. So that's kind of the whole purpose of subject pronouns, and it's the same purpose in the French language as well. So you have to kind of figure out both what the actual French word for some of these subject pronouns is, as well as when you actually use it, as far as what it can replace as a noun. So first things first, we'll start with the word I. In French, the word I is je. And just like in the English language, when you use the word I, you're talking about yourself. The word you in the French language is the word tu. And just like in the English language, you use it when you are talking to one other person. The word he in the French language is il. And of course, just like in the English language, you use it when you are talking about another boy. The word she in the French language is elle. And just like in the English language, you use it when you're talking about a girl. Now this is one that's a little bit different than the English language. The word on. Now we're not talking about one like one item, but kind of like the general one, the royal we, so to speak. It's the idea of when you're talking about people in general, such as one must watch their video notes if one wants to earn full credit in French class. So it's kind of a weird thing because we don't use it very often in the English language, but you're using it when you are talking about people in general. It basically means one, or it can also mean we. The more common word that they'll use for the word we in the French language is the word nous. And of course, you use the word we or the word nous in the French language when you're talking about a group of people that also includes yourself. Now that's different than vous. Vous has actually got two purposes in the French language. It's used for the word you for one person, and before you think, but we already had that, that's the word tu. This is the word you for one person that you are speaking to formally. So if you want to say, you, Ms. Pittman, are principal, who I need to speak to formally, you are a great person, you would use vous and not tu. Whereas if you're turning to your friend and you're saying, hey friend, you are a great person, in French you're going to use the word tu. So vous and tu both mean you for one person, but vous has a special other job. It also means y'all, or you plural as we say it in the English language. And you would use it when you are talking to, not about, but when you're talking directly to a group of people, and when you want to say something like, y'all need to do your homework, you would use vous. The last two on the French list here are for plural when you want to use the word they. They have two versions of the word they. They have the word ils and they have the word elles. Now you can see over there from the definition that elles is used whenever it's girls only. If you are talking about they, the group of girls that's standing over there, then you would use elles. If you are talking about they, a group of boys though, and you want to say that they are really nice, you would use ils. Ils, though, also gets used if you're talking about both boys and girls together. It has nothing to do with how many boys or girls there are. It has simply to do with as soon as there are both boys and girls present, they go ahead and default to the word ils for the word they. So the hardest part about learning these is knowing when to use them in sentences and how to use them to replace words in sentences, and it gets a little bit complicated. But the first step is just the very basics of knowing exactly what they mean. So this is just another chart. The reason why I wanted you to write it one more time is this is usually how you will see your verb charts set up. I know we haven't talked very much about verbs yet, but once we get into them, your verb charts will be set up in this manner. The reason why they put the subject pronouns in this format, in this order, is because what you have here over here are singular pronouns, as in there's always one person. This one's kind of an exception, but we'll get into that. And then over here on the right-hand side are all your plural ones. Again, slightly an exception, but we'll get to that. And then they actually kind of match up across the way here. If I am a part of the group, then it becomes we. If you and then there's multiple you, then it becomes y'all. If there's a whole bunch of he's, then it becomes they. If there's a whole bunch of she's, it becomes they. So it matches up, or it has a rhyme and a reason to it, both when you look at the columns that they're put in and what they're put across from. So I know this is just having you write it down one more time, but I want to go ahead and go through and make sure that you're knowing how to say these one more time as well. The word for I is je. The word for you is tu. The word for he is il. The word for she is elle. The word for one or we in general, people in general, is on. The word for we is nous. The word for y'all is vous. And then the two words for they are ils and elles. Now, one other thing that just occurred to me is you'll notice how they have this J apostrophe. If the word je is followed directly by a word that starts with a vowel, they'll actually tack the je onto the front of that word by dropping the E and doing an apostrophe. I know it's a really random little thing to remember, but if you ever see a J apostrophe instead of a je, they're still just using the word I. It has to do with pronunciation's sake. They like to squish the two sounds together. So do be aware that a J apostrophe is the same thing as a je, the word I. So when we start talking about these subject pronouns, it becomes important that you recognize the difference between a subject and a verb in a sentence. This might go a little bit over your head at first, but I kind of want to just float it out there, and that way when we start referring to, if you can recognize the subject or the verb of the sentence, you'll know kind of what we're referring back to. So real quick, in English, sentences have a subject, and a verb. Every single English sentence out there, to be a complete sentence, you must have a subject and a verb. Now, the subject is, of course, the person or thing that is doing the action or that is being described. It's the thing that the whole sentence is about. The verb is the action word, like jump or sing, that is describing what's happening in the sentence or what the subject is doing. It can also be a linking word, like the word is or are, that links the subject to a describing word all about that subject. And I'll show you an example of that in just a second. So when you look at the sentence, Denise sings well, Denise is the person that the whole sentence is about. That makes her the subject. The thing that she's doing in the sentence is sings, so that's the action word, or that's the verb. Same kind of situation here with Simon is blonde. The whole sentence is about Simon. That makes him our subject. And the linking word here that links him to the describing word blonde is the word is. So is, even though it's kind of a weird way to think of it as being an action word, is actually the verb of your sentence. Now, French sentences look the exact same. They have subjects and they have verbs. So they've taken these two sentences and they've translated them to French. So here you have Denise chante bien for Denise sings well. Of course, Denise is still the subject of the sentence because it's still the whole point and the whole thing that the person is about. And then chante is still the action word of singing in the sentence, so it is the verb. Same thing with Simon est blonde. Simon is still the subject of the sentence, and then this is the word for is, and it's linking it to the description of him being blonde. Now, not every sentence is in the exact same order and as simple as that, but it's important that you start thinking about those subjects and verbs, because here eventually you're going to be using these pronouns, the je, tu, il, elle that we just talked about, to replace some of those subjects. So let's go back to our sentence about Denise, and let's talk about how the noun in that sentence can be replaced by a pronoun. So if we're talking about Denise and we're saying that Denise is a friend, in the English language, if we want to continue talking about Denise and say that Denise is 15 years old, we don't have to repeat Denise's name. We can use the pronoun she, and we can replace that female, Denise, with the word she, and it makes sense, and we know that the she is referring back to Denise that we were talking about one sentence ago. The same exact thing can happen in the French language. This is saying, again, Denise est une amie, is Denise is a friend, And then instead of saying that Denise a 15 ans, for Denise is 15 years old, we know that we can replace a single female, such as Denise, if we're talking about her, with the word she in French, and the word she in French is elle. Elle a 15 ans would mean she is 15 years old. I know it's a little bit strange and complicated, so if you're having some questions or problems with this, we will definitely discuss it more in class. But go ahead and start working on memorizing the actual meanings of those subject pronouns, as far as je means I, tu means you, il means he, elle means she, nous means we, vous means y'all, and ils and elles both mean they.